Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today's webcast, Working with Sites and Revit Without Getting Dirty. Our presenter today is Brett Barkman. He's a solutions engineer with Hagerman Company. We're also joined on the line by Dan Rosenberg. He's a solutions engineer with Hagerman Company as well, and he's on the line to answer any questions that might come in as we go. Before we get started, I'll let you know that you're in listening only mode. If you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the question panel located on the right-hand side of your screen, and they will be addressed throughout by Dan and some at the end by Brett as well. As we close down the session today, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey. We ask that you take a few moments to fill that out for us. This webcast does qualify for one AIA continuing education credit. If you would like to receive this credit, you can leave your AIA number on question 4 of our survey and we can submit that for you. Additionally, all registrants will receive a follow-up email containing a link for the recording of this presentation. And with that, I will hand things over to Brett.
Thanks, Ashley. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Glad you tuned in with us today. The topic today is working with sites in Revit without getting dirty. The premise of today isn't going to be to dive into every single thing that we could do with sites in Revit. This is focused more on the basics for those folks who don't work with the site tools in Revit regularly. Myself is included in that, and that's where I came up with this idea. So let's go over the agenda. So we're going to basically do 3 things to start. First, we're going to review the sample site drawing that I'm going to be using today and what you can do to make sure that that drawing is clean and ready for you to bring into Revit. What we want to try to avoid here is having to rework the CAD data on the Revit side. We just want to be able to bring it in, get our information that we want from it, and move on, right? Especially if we don't work on sites every day like a civil person would, then we want to get in and we want to get out and get back to doing what we do. So we'll look at some prep work on the CAD side. We will also look at using AutoCAD's data extraction wizard to harness the data that we can use to create a topo surface in Revit. The reason we're going to focus on that first is the what-if situation that I'm going to present is a site plan that is a flat drawing, which I personally don't like that. I'd rather have the 3D information. But what do we do when we don't get what we want? Then we have to work with what we have. And so that's the example that I'm going to start with. The data extraction wizard in AutoCAD is going to help us do that. Once we have that data, then we can use it to create a site a topo surface in Revit very, very quickly. So if you are the type of Revit user where you know you can create a site, you heard about it, but you either have never done it or you don't do it very often, so you might feel rusty, then this is a perfect workflow for you so you can create the site and move on. Okay, so let's look at our CAD drawing. Simple, or it's not very simple. I do have some things hidden here, and I want to kind of step back in this drawing and take a look at what you might run into in your environment. So if I were to roll this back to when I first opened it, everything was turned on, all the layers were thawed, and it looked like this. And the first time I look at drawings like this, it's pretty overwhelming. And there's a lot of information here. Most of it we don't need, but it's in my way. So right off the bat, you might be thinking, okay, well, I have to clean this drawing up before I can use it. And in a sense, that is what we need to do. So the first thing that I did to this drawing, even just to get ready for today, was I froze the layers that I didn't need. But I also want to make sure that I can work with the layers that I do need without the others getting in the way. So there's two things I did here. Over in the layer manager, I created a property filter for the layers in order to just slim down the list of layers that I'm looking at. And we won't be getting into detail on how I did that today, but if you just want to remember that you can create a property filter just by right-clicking and going to New Properties Filter, and then in a future webcast we'll get into the specifics on doing that. Right now we just want to activate the one I have set up already. Did that just to save a little time here today. So that's the first thing we did. The second thing I did was I created a layer state in order to isolate these layers from the rest and do it very quickly. Your layer states manager is sitting right here inside the layer manager. And I created myself a layer state called contour layer, so I'm just going to restore that. And that brings me to here, so I'm only looking at the contour information. It takes a few minutes to set those up if you want to do that. If not, then you could just use the layer list, freeze the layers that you want, and thaw the layers that you don't want, vice versa, and so forth. Next, let's look at the overall environment of the drawing here. So I'm just going to orbit this. And one of the first things I look for whenever I open a civil drawing or a site drawing is whether or not I have 2D information or 3D information. Sometimes they tell you or hand you a site plan, assuming that it has everything you need, and then you find out that it's flat. Like you can see here, I'm just turning it to the front, so it is 2D, which means the contour lines aren't really going to help us all that much in Revit. We have to find another way to develop the site. I'm going to turn on the wireframe display style here so that I can use the view cube. There we go. And we're a bit out of view here, so I'll do a zoom extents. So some things are going to happen in these files. They're all going to be different. We all know that. So, but mainly the goal is to get the drawing set up the way that you like to have it set up so that you can get what you want out of it. All right, so the file itself is good enough for us to move on. Now, there's groups of contour information in here. This particular drawing, there is the existing contours as well as the new. In this drawing, the existing contours are indicated by the green and the gray layers around the outside, and everything else is the new contour. So we're going to actually we're going to do this process twice. We're going to do a set for the existing contours. We'll do another set for the new so that we can work with them in Revit separately. And that's why I created the layer filter so I can shorten up the list. Notice when I pull down the layer list here, I don't get the entire list of layers in this drawing. And if you've been exposed to these types of drawings in the past, sometimes there's hundreds of layers listed. So using a layer filter slims that down so that I can find what I want a whole lot faster. So I've got some existing layers. They're indicated by an EX in the name. And then the new layers. And we're going to start with existing, so I'm just going to freeze the other ones. I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way, since there aren't that many layers. Let's see, got those three here. And make sure I leave all of the existing layers visible. Okay, so there we go. Now, once you have your drawing set, so that's basically step one, whatever process you decide to use to set your drawing up. This is just the way that I found that doesn't take long to set up, and it's also the way I like to set it up. And so your steps might be a little different than mine, and that's okay. So, but you do want to segregate what you're going to extract from a drawing when you do this. Now, what are we going to extract? Well, we've already determined that the contour lines themselves aren't going to help us here because it's all sitting at elevation 0. But the text that is sitting on your contour lines, which we see all the time, is going to help us here. So we're going to be focused on the text objects. Now again, these are sitting at elevation 0. So if I look at this in the properties, we have a true position here. So these are the real life coordinates for these points in space. That's going to help, but they're sitting at 0. However, the value that's in the text is telling us what elevation it's supposed to be. So we can still extract it, and that's a good thing. All right, so let's go to a data extraction. You'll find that on the Insert tab in the ribbon, on the Linking and Extraction panel, and the button you'll need is right here. I'm pointing this out now because not everyone does this every day, and if you're like me, there's so many buttons in the ribbon, we don't know where they all are. So show you where it is here, but I also want to show you another way to run this command without ever knowing where it is in the ribbon. It's one of my favorite features of AutoCAD, and that is the command search. So let's pretend I'm on some other tab. I don't know where that button is. I'm not a fan of the ribbon. I don't want to go hunting and pecking in the ribbon to find it. I just want my command. So let's go to the application menu and use the command search, which is a search bar across the top here. I'm just going to type in extract and see if that's enough information to locate that command. Now the command search does a really nice job of surfacing your commands and telling you where it's located in the ribbon. So if you are interested on where a command is that you're not familiar with, the command search will tell you what ribbon tab it's on. So this one's on the Insert tab. There's the command. There's the panel it's on, and then the name of the command. Now, all of these links in the search results are clickable. So you can run your command from right here without ever going to the ribbon. So I'll go ahead and execute that and start the data extraction. And that is the same thing as going to the ribbon. So if I go to Insert and Linking and Extraction, and there's the button, it's the same thing. So showed you both ways. For those of you who may not be a fan of the ribbon, then you can use command search to find it. And if you are, then I've showed you where it's located. So we're ready to start our data extraction. We're going to create a new one. And these are some old files here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click these and delete them, and we'll make brand new ones. So the first thing that happens is you'll be prompted to create an extraction template. And these are external files, and they have a DXE file extension. So I'm going to reuse this name, Site Data Existing, for the existing contours, and we'll save that. On the next screen, we will select objects in the drawing, and we'll just place a window around the site, around the existing contours. Now this is where it really helps to go ahead and freeze all of the layers you're not interested in, and you'll get a much cleaner selection set. We won't have to do as much filtering of the data as you'll see here in a moment. So we'll press enter when we're done there, and then we'll look at the settings. In the additional settings here, we can further filter down what we want to extract from the selection that we just made. Since I've already mentioned that we're only after the text from that selection, we don't need to extract from blocks, so we can uncheck that. And we don't have any XREFs in this drawing, so we can uncheck that. Also, we're going to extract from model space only. If we choose all objects in the drawing, then the extraction wizard will scan all of the layout tabs that might be in your drawing. So if you don't want to do that, then you have a choice between model space and everything. So we'll extract from model space. Okay there. And then next. Okay, so here is what the wizard has picked up for us. The contour lines, which are the polylines in the text. We don't need the polylines here. They're not going to help us, so we will filter those out. All right, and then we'll just click Next. On the fourth screen of the wizard, you'll start to see the properties of the objects that you have selected. And there's a lot of them. So if we scroll down the list here, there's a lot of properties that belong to the text in this case. Now we can pick and choose which properties we want to actually extract and leave the rest behind. And we have some category filters over here. So if I start unchecking the filters, you'll notice that less information will get extracted. So if I uncheck them all, then the preview here shows, well, I'm not going to extract anything. So I'm breaking this down so we can go through these one at a time and show what properties belong to which category, which ought to help you when you try to do this. So obviously this is a 2D drawing, so we won't be using any 3D properties. Just wanted to show them to you, so we can leave that one unchecked. The drawing filter will surface all of the properties for the file itself. And we don't need any of those, so we'll uncheck that one. The general filter will give you some layer information and the associated properties for the layer. We don't need any of those, so we can also leave that one unchecked. The geometry filter will provide the X, Y, and Z values of that object. That's going to be useful. So we will leave this one checked. And let's look at the text filter. The text properties will be things like the height, the style, and the value, which we'll talk about here. The value is what we read, so the 780, the 820, the 110, whatever the value that sits in the text, that's going to help us because our Z values are all 0, this being a flat CAD file. So we can actually use the value in place of position Z in this case. And the rest of them we can uncheck. There we go. So since all our Z's are 0 right now, that won't help us, but the value has the actual elevations in it. So we can filter that in place of position Z here. So we're going to be extracting text, and we're going to be getting the properties X, Y, and Z. So we'll do Next, and now we can get a look at our data. We still have more information than we bargained for, and that's okay. We'll slim this down in just a moment. But we can scroll through here and look at our data and see what we have. And these all look like decent elevation values. Looks like they're based off of sea level. And so that's what we're extracting from the text. Now the other two columns, count and name, we won't need those. So we can uncheck the boxes to show count column and name column. Now we're getting down to what Revit needs in order to build a topo surface from 2D points. Lastly, we'll uncheck the box to combine identical rows. That way we're making sure that we're getting every bit of text that we want that has those values in it. Now from here, if you happen to have some information and it just doesn't look right, maybe there's text in one of your columns here versus numbers, that's okay. You can right click on one of the columns and you could go to filter options and you can uncheck any of these values if you don't want them to be extracted in the last step. So there are ways to do some filtering after you capture your data versus before you start. You can actually do it in either case. So we'll just hit cancel there. And so since our data looks good, we're ready to move on. So we'll go to Next. And this is the last screen. This is where we create the file. So we'll output it. And I'm just going to overwrite this one here. We're doing existing, so we'll pick up that name. And then we'll save it. and finish. So that's how we create the extraction. Now, when you're doing this on your own, you'll probably be able to do it a little more quickly than with me explaining it. So it doesn't take as long as what we just went through. Just want you to be aware of that. You'll find yourself being able to go very quickly through the wizard, especially if you have stored the extraction template, and then you can reuse them later. Now let's take a look at the extraction file, just so you can see what's under the hood. There it is right there. I'm just going to open this in Notepad. It's just a simple CSV file. You don't have to do anything to it. Just wanted to show it to you. Also want to point out that the data itself is in decimal format. So it is important for a clean move over to Revit that when you start this process, make sure that the units of your drawing are set to decimal. If they're set to architectural, when you try to use that CSV file in Revit, it won't work. So it's better to set your units to decimal in the CAD file before you do the extraction. I didn't mention that before. Sorry about that, but I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that when you do your first extraction. So we don't need to do anything here, so we'll just close it. And we're ready to move over to Revit and build our first topo surface. All right, I've started a file to save some time here. This is just a blank. Nothing's been created in here yet, and it was based off of the commercial default template. I'm just sitting in the site plan view to start with. And I'm going to go straight to the Massing and Site tab, and then Topo Surface. And then if we were linking in a CAD file, when we go to Create from Import here, we would select Import Instance. In this case, however, we're going to use the second option to specify a points file. And then we'll use our new CSV file. Revit's going to ask us one question, and that's what units we need to bring this in. This particular example was in feet in the CAD file, so we're going to stick with decimal feet here. All right. Now, very common in Revit when we bring something in, whether it be point data or a CAD file or other Revit elements, if they are too far away from the internal origin of Revit, then we get a warning. And all it's telling us is it's too far away, and we're going to center it around the origin so you can move on. We don't have to do anything here. We're just going to finish the surface. Okay, so where's my surface? I'm going to do a zoom to fit, and it's not here. And that is simply because I started with a default template, haven't dealt with view ranges for any of the views yet, and this site is sitting about 800 feet up in the air, and that's why we can't see it. So next thing I need to do is tweak the view range real quick. And we'll just set it to sky's the limit for pretty much everything. And then we'll raise the cut plane to about 1,000 feet. We'll do another zoom to fit, and there it is. In 3D, surface looks like this, so you can see the contours are already created. So we didn't have to actually create the site. And that's the premise of this exercise today is you're the person, you don't work on sites a lot, you haven't had a lot of exposure to the tool, haven't practiced with it a lot, but you need to create a site. So can we do it quickly and accurately? And this is one way that you can do that. Back in the site plan, just to reiterate, there's Revit's internal origin for this file. We haven't changed it or worked with it at all, but it is centered around that, and that's all that warning meant. So it's not a bad thing. It's just letting us know it had to recenter everything for us. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the webcast And also, if there's any questions about this, as long as time permits, we'll do our best to answer those. So there's the first one. Okay, now what we're going to do is go back and repeat the exercise for the new contours. So back in the CAD file, let's flip-flop our layers. So we will thaw the new layers, and then we will freeze the existing layers. All right. Now, if you notice here, we've got a few extra text elements that are visible now. They don't have anything to do with the information we're after, which is the text that's inside all the bubbles. So we'll want to account for that when we do the next extraction. So again, on the Insert tab, linking in extraction. This time, we're going to use a previous extraction as a template. And the one we're going to reuse is our existing one, and we're going to use this to create one for the new contours. So we'll name the new one. See, not sure what happened. I think I bumped my wheel. Let's type it again. And then we'll select the objects, place another window. But we're not going to finish this just yet. I'll hold down my Shift key and deselect so that I can remove those extra text elements from the extraction. However, just to show you what happens, I'm going to leave one of them selected and see if it gets picked up by the extraction wizard. So go ahead and press enter, and we'll review the settings. Notice here that everything is set the way it was before, so you don't have to change anything, and that's the beauty of those extraction templates. We'll go to next. There's a lot more objects in this selection set. We're still after the text. It did pick up the one extra text object, but it's M-text, which means I can uncheck the box and move on. That's good. Next again, our same three properties are still selected, so we don't have to change anything there. And now we can go right to looking at the data for the new contours. I always like to scroll down a little bit and see if there's any other properties that might have been captured, and if so, then I can filter those out from here. That looks good. So next, and then we will make a new file. We'll just overwrite the one I had here from earlier. So we'll save that one. And next, and then finish. So that one's ready to go. Okay, so let's switch back over to Revit. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to do a second topo surface, so and they will be overlaid, and then we'll talk about why I'm doing that. Before I do that next surface, with this being the existing contours, let's select that surface and change its phase created to existing. That's all we're going to do, because we want to have an existing site and a new site. But remember, in Revit we have this feature called phasing, which will scratch the surface of here, but it is playing a part, so that's why I wanted to mention that. So whenever you bring in existing point data or an existing CAD file to create your first topo surface, it's a good idea right when you create it is turn right around and set its phase created to existing. Okay. Also make sure in your site plan view that the phase for that view is still new construction. So I haven't changed this up to this point, and I'm just going to leave it alone. So we're ready to create the next topo surface. Again, we're going to do specify points file. This time we'll choose the new site data. Decimal feet still. And we get the same warning, so we're aware of that. But notice that now we can see where the overlap is between existing and new. So we'll just finish that. So we can see it right there. And if I select it, then it's face created as new construction. So we have true, existing, and new. In 3D, you can still kind of see them. And they're just laid on top of each other. Now, if all you're doing is using it for reference, you're not doing actual work on the site, then you might be close to being done here. Just want to show some illustrations with the phase control here. I'm showing both phases. And usually when we bring the site into Revit, at least in my experience, we've always been looking at what the site is going to be. We never had to actually morph the site or change the site from existing to new physically in Revit. We just wanted as close to the finished look that we could get so that we could design our building and we can show it to our customers. So to do that, we'll do a couple things here. So in the view, I'm in the 3D view right now, nothing selected. Let's change the face filter from show all to complete. So it removes the gray, but both surfaces are still sitting there. But they blend a little bit better to give you an idea of what the finished site would look like. Okay. We'll switch that back to show all. The existing goes gray and the new stays in its original color. Set back to show complete on the filter. Now let's switch the phase itself for the view. We'll turn it to existing. And now you can see the new condition just isn't there. And if we switch that over to new construction, it shows it. All right. Now, this is just one way. We'll bring this in a few other ways to show some differences, and then you can decide how you are going to work with this in your office. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete the new surface. We'll keep the old one. I'm also going to reset the phase filter to show all, so it looks existing. This time, instead of creating a separate topo for the new, let's do a graded region. This way, we can change the existing surface into the new surface, and it still accounts for the phasing. And another added benefit it's going to give us is we'll be able to calculate the earth that's either added or removed from the site, which we can't do when the surfaces are completely separate. So here we have two ways of doing this. We can create a new topo surface exactly like the existing one, or we can create one based on the perimeter points. Now we're going to do the second one here, and we'll select the existing site, and all it's done is created a new surface, but it's only given me the perimeter points. The reason I use that option is so that I can bring in the new data right on top of it. And then Revit will account for all the cut and fill in the site to create the new condition. So we can still do the rest, the same process as we did before. So we'll specify the points file and again bring in the new site data. And it brings it and lays it right on top, but it actually is going to change it because of the phasing. So we'll just finish it. Now we get a different appearance here. Because we did a graded region, now the changes in the site are shown in red. This, to me, is a more descriptive way of showing the difference between existing contours and new contours in Revit. The other way just laid the two on top of each other. We could see where they are, but we might have to look a little harder. But we only saw this out here. We didn't see all this other surface changes before. So this is new information that can help you. So now if we work with the phase filter, we'll go to show complete. So now we're just looking at the final product here. And if I change the phase itself back to existing, now we can watch it really change. Look at that. And I think that's a little better way of working with the site in Revit. So you can bring in two topo surfaces, or you could bring in the existing, and then you could use graded region to bring in the new. And it kind of meshes them together a little better. Okay, now, so there's ways to work with the 2D data from a CAD file that came to you that way. Now let's go ahead and look at the same site, but a 3D version of that site. And we'll look at the difference in how the tools work there. I also want you to kind of, if you can, just remember kind of what this site looks like. It is a pretty good topo surface. Got all our contours there, but I want you to pay attention to the difference in the accuracy or the overall look based compared to this to what we're going to do next. I think you'll be able to tell the difference. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete the surfaces that I've created so far. And since I have the other one in the other phase, I'll need to switch the phase in order to get to it. There. So we'll take those out. We'll go back to the site plan. So I do have a 3D version of the same site. So whenever you have 3D data, there's no need to do a data extraction from the CAD site. We can go straight to Insert and link that drawing in. So we'll link CAD and we'll link our site in. And how you do your options when you're linking in a site file is up to you. For this example, I'm going to preserve the colors, and I'm unchecking the correct lines that are off axis. This is usually checked by default. Whenever I do a site plan, I like to uncheck it because it's a site, and most of that drawing is off axis anyway, at least in my experience. So I'm going to uncheck that. For positioning, auto origin to origin is best, whatever level you need. And then it's up to you if you want to bring this into the current view only. For now, I'm just going to leave it unchecked, just in case I need it in other views. All right, so there's the site. Looks similar to the 2D file. Again, there's an overwhelming amount of information here, but we can ignore most of it. All right, now I want to do something before I create the surface, and that is find out what size this drawing is. Even though everything looked good on the CAD side, it's a civil drawing, and there's a very good chance that we have a feet versus inches or a scaling issue. So we want to verify that first thing. So I'm just going to go to the measure tool. And let's see, this says it's supposed to be 24 feet. So we'll take a measurement from here and we'll just get close. All right, and look at that. That is roughly 24 inches in Revit. So we have a scaling issue here. We have to fix that before we create the surface. That is something you won't get warned on. Revit's not going to tell you, hey, this is out of scale or anything. No warning whatsoever. So you might want to just make a note of it, that as soon as you bring in a 3D file, measure something or use whatever method you want to use and verify that it is the right size. In my case here, it's not. So we need to scale this drawing. Fortunately, Revit has a very easy way to resize a CAD file. So I'm just going to select it. I'm going to come over to the type properties of the CAD file and change the scale factor. It is a factor of 12. Usually when you're going in civil, that's drawn decimal feet. Revit wants to interpret that as inches, even though I told it to bring it in decimal feet. So it's a bit of a gotcha there. All right, so we'll scale that up. Now we're ready to create the topo surface. And if you wanted to look at this in 3D before you did it, that's entirely up to you. So there's still a lot of 2D data in the drawing, but the contours are up here ready to use, and they are in 3D. All right, so let's create one more surface. We'll go to Masking and Site, start a new topo. We'll go to Create from Import. This time we're going to select Import Instance. Then we'll select the CAD file. Make sure we look for the blue highlight. I like to see that. Seeing is believing, right? All right, so when we select Import Instance, we'll have the ability to select the layers that we want to import. And we have a pretty good idea of which layers we need. We don't need them all. We only need the contour layers. So let's check none. And then we will cherry pick the contour layers. Now the ones we'll need are going to be these two. We don't need any layer that has text on it. We only need the line work. So we'll get those two. We're also going to get these two here. We're going to skip these here because what we're going to do here is get a little bit of the existing. This is the gray and green layers I mentioned earlier that are around the outside of the site. These layers here, these two, are for this area that's indicated in orange. That's going to be useful. We're going to ignore these three because these existing layers lay right on top of the new condition. So we're going to leave those out. And then we'll use these two layers here, which is all the magenta indicated for the new. And again, we're going to ignore any of the contour text layers. We don't need those. Okay, that. All right, so the site is ready. Notice there's a lot more points in this topo surface than the other one. And the reason being is it's pulling the line information in 3D versus before when all we had was the text objects and we were only pulling a point wherever those text objects were located. And there's usually only one or two of those to annotate a contour line. So we get a much more descriptive site here. We'll go ahead and finish it and take a look in 3D and see what we have. All right, so let's hide the CAD file. Do a zoom to fit. All right, so what are we looking at here? Phase existing. Let's switch that back to new construction. Zoom to fit. So there it is. So yeah, that wasn't anything wrong with the site there. The phase for the 3D view was set to existing. And since this site was created in the new phase, it wasn't shown right away. So I had to change that to new construction. Now let's look at the site. Much more detail here. It was very obvious to me the first time I saw it, being able to bring in the 3D data versus the 2D. So yes, you can do it with 2D, but the accuracy might be sacrificed to a point when doing that. Of course, when you when all you have is 2D data, you can still edit a surface. Here, we'll switch back to the site plan, make it easier to see. You can still edit a surface and add more points with the place point command, and you can set the elevation and then add the points. But as you can see, there's so many points. When you're faced with doing it that way, you can point yourself to death. So that is the difference. It would take longer, but it could still be done. So always a good idea, if you're not already doing it, is ask your civil partners for a 3D survey of the site if they have it. If not, then at least now we've given you a way to leverage the 2D data to get you started on a topo surface in Revit. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to the slides for a moment and make sure we've covered everything. So we prepared the CAD drawing, adjusted the layers and the visibility as we needed. We did data extraction, topo surface from the points. Okay, so I think that is pretty much it. So at this point, that's all I have to present today. Of course, I'd love to show you more. If we had more time, I would like to leave the last few minutes of today so that we can answer any questions that are coming in. If you haven't asked your question yet, you want to, feel free. And as long as time permits, we'll get them answered.
All right. Hey, Brett, this is Dan. I've been monitoring the questions as they've been coming in. First of all, awesome job on the presentation. I think it was great stuff. Let's take a look at the questions here. So I was addressing most of them as they were coming in. Some were admin related, but we did have one from Jim Sander. He wants to know, is there a way to extract civil 3D storm and sanitary data into Revit?
Ooh, wow, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before. I'll tell you what though, since I have it installed, and I was going to mention it anyway, I know all we talked about today was getting a topo started, you know, and bringing data from CAD over, but not taking it forward. There is an add-on to Revit called the Site Designer. It's available in the App Store. What I don't know, honestly, is if that type of information exists there. So I don't know on that one, Jim, if you can hear me, if you can bring that type of information over. However, since we can bring our CAD data over, let me go to visibility graphics for a moment. You do have access to all the layers in a CAD file. And I do know that there are some sanitary layers in this particular file. And yeah, it is mostly 2D information, but it is the locations of things like storm and sanitary. And you could use that in order to create those elements in Revit. Now, Revit isn't known for having true civil tools in it. But we could still do things like route pipe, but it's not really meant for civil. And that's where I'm wondering the Site Designer might work, but I think this is still more related to actual site tools. Just at a glance here, I don't see anything related to storm, sewage, utilities, and so forth.
Right, so just to kind of add on, I've had a little bit of experience with the Site Designer tools. So I guess most of the time it's coming in from a land XML file. And I guess if they have that data in there as a line, we would be able to extract it. But yeah, looking at the tools available, I don't know if we would be able to call it out as storm or sanitary line, but we might be able to at least find where those lines were located and add some sort of family to it.
Right. Yeah, if let me switch this view to wireframe here, maybe we'll see some more line work. There we go. So I was hidden. So yeah, so there's so much here. I'd have to work on the visibility a little bit. I won't do that in front of everyone, but a lot of this information is the storm and sanitary information, but it's still 2D line work. Those tools, you know, that's what Civil 3D is for. Now, if those are modeled in Civil 3D and we link in that CAD file, then it will be there in 3D. So that's where Civil 3D and Revit can work together. But Revit itself doesn't have built-in tools for things like storm and sanitary that I know of, right, Dan?
Correct.
All right, so I hope that answers your question. Yeah, we got a few more questions coming in now here.
Yeah, I'm looking at some now.
Yeah. Is there a guide to this? Is the next one? There's no guide, not a written guide, but we are recording this webcast, and when it's ready, it will be on Hagerman.com under our events area, and you'll see a section for recorded webcasts, and you'll be able to watch it as many times as you want. So I hope that helps. Okay, we got a question about the origin point in relation to sea level. That's one I could do very quickly. Just hopefully I can get to the rest. So, yeah, so the project base point, I believe, is what they're asking about. And to illustrate that one, we'll switch to an elevation view. So there's your site. Let's hide the CAD file. We can grab it. There we go. Okay, so here's our site. It's about 800 feet up, and here are the original levels for the drawing. Excuse me, for the project. So yes, what we would do here is, if I wanted to illustrate this, is level 0 is way down here. When we know that's not where it's going to be, so we would move that up. I'll just give something close. I'll say 792 and 782. So that at least puts the levels in relation to the site, right? But someone has probably already thought to themselves, I don't want that to read 792. I want it to read 0, right? So yeah, it's at 792 as far as sea level goes, but that's not what we want to show in the project. And that's where the project base point comes in. So let's go back to the site plan. And I'm also going to hide the CAD file here. We don't need this anymore. All right, and let's see here. I didn't delete my site, did I? There. Yeah, I did. For some reason I hid the site. Well, that wasn't too smart, was it? Okay, so here's the site. So the project base point in relation to sea level. So if we want to match the two, or get the best of both worlds, you want the site or the environment to be at the appropriate elevation on planet Earth, but we want to work with our main level starting at 0. So first thing what I'm going to do here, just to illustrate, is the project base point, and it's actually sitting right on top of the project origin right now. And I want to unclip the base point so I can just move it. I only want to move the point. I don't want to move the whole project. I'm doing this just to show that there are 2 points in Revit. One is Revit's origin, which is actually the survey point, which we hardly ever mess with. Okay? And then there's the project base point. The 2 are not to be considered the same or treated that way. That base point can go anywhere. So I'm going to lay this right back on top here just so they're in the same spot. Leave it unclipped. And then for the project base point, let's highlight the elevation. I'll select it and change it to the same value I used for level 1, 792. You won't see anything happen here. Let's reclip that. But we did move it up 792 feet. But we moved the coordinate or the base point. We didn't move anything else. Let's go back to the elevation and look at the difference. So just by moving the project base point to the elevation that you need, you can have your levels start at 0 if you want, and everything else stays in place. Okay, so I hope that answers the question about sea level topo data. The site I used, or the CAD file that I used, that was, the whole thing was at sea level. So I hope that helps. Next question. from Steve. Is there a way to extract actual 2D contour line instead of just the text points? Yes, and that was the third example that I did. That was in 3D, however, but you link in your CAD file, just like we did, and then build your topo surface based off of the layers that the contour lines are on from the CAD file. So great question. Next, when you bring in the existing and the new CSV files, Revit moves them each individually to the origin center. Wouldn't they potentially be misaligned? There is that is potentially, or excuse me, that is possible, in my opinion. But when I was doing it, I didn't mention it. I was very careful not to move anything after I brought it in. And one thing you can do in your CAD file, if you want to, say, create a grid or a rectangle, just use lines, and rope off what you're going to extract, then that helps with the realigning center to center in Revit. But in the case here, in all the examples, everything was centered around Revit's internal origin, or that survey point. So when I brought both data sets in, since I didn't adjust that point location at all, then they centered around the same spot, which means that they were where they were supposed to be. But it is possible, depending on what you use for your, where your survey point and your project base point is. You just make sure that those don't move in between your extractions if you happen to be doing more than one. So I hope that helps. But there is a potential there, I would say. You just have to do some checking after you bring each data set in and see if anything is out of alignment. If it is, then at least then you'll know. Okay, how to deal with updates to the civil file. All right, well, if your civil file is in 3D, then no problem, because we're always linking CAD files in, right? We're not importing CAD files, we always want to link. And so if a civil file, if it's 3D, is updated, then all you do is reload it in Revit and you'll pick up the updates. Now that'll be just for the CAD file. So if you developed a topo surface after you linked in the CAD file, then those changes would not automatically update your topo surface. You would either have to edit those surfaces yourself or delete them and then create a new topo based off of the updated Civil 3D file. Can the CAD file be deleted after the topo is created? Yes. You would go to Manage Links, right? And then go to CAD Formats. If you're done with your CAD data, absolutely. If you don't need it anymore, remove it. I wouldn't hit the delete key on a linked CAD file because it still maintains the link to the external file. And then, which of course, then, it's still connected to your Revit project. So if you want to remove it, you actually have to come into Manage Links and then hit the Remove button. All right, let's see. I'll see one more question here. Hopefully I didn't skip one. Oh, no, that was it. Updates to the civil file. Dan, I don't know if I missed anything. Do you?
Doesn't look like it. I think there might have been one or two. It looks like, I can't remember if we covered this one or not. It was asking, can this work in Revit MEP? Well, yeah, it should, because if you're working in one of the later versions, Revit MEP has been combined into the full version of Revit, so you would have access to all the tools. So yes, it would be possible. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, this workflow would be the exact same. Absolutely.
Yeah, it looks like we covered about everything there.
Okay, yeah, I don't see any more coming in. I hope we didn't leave anyone out. But if we did, I think they can send their questions in after the fact, but I'm not sure about that.
Yes, I'm going to jump in here and let everyone know that if you do think of additional questions, you can simply reply to that confirmation or reminder email you receive from GoToWebinar. We can get those to Brett or whoever they need to go to get your questions answered. Once again, if you could take a few moments to answer the short survey, we would appreciate it. It will just automatically pop up as we close down the session today. And again, you will receive a recording of this presentation via email, most likely tomorrow. And that's all I have. So I don't see any more questions coming in. So I'll just thank Brett for the great presentation and Dan for sitting in as well. And thank all of you for attending today's webcast. Have a great day, everybody.